On the day I came of age, the crown prince annulled our betrothal. In an instant, I became the biggest laughingstock in the entire capital. All because he annulled our betrothal to marry my once obscure concubine-born younger sister. To annul a legitimate marriage for a concubine's daughter is the greatest humiliation for a legitimate daughter of a noble house. Yet I couldn't care less, I even felt like laughing. Given another chance at life, I'd love to see what kind of splash she can make now. My name is Song Yujin. My father is the great general of the state of DeLiang, my mother the princess of Huayan personally bestowed by the late emperor, and my brothers have each earned glorious military achievements. Our Song family is arguably the most rapidly rising and enviable clan in DeLiang. My marriage to the crown prince was personally bestowed by His Majesty when I first entered the palace at the age of 6. His Majesty praised my exquisite beauty and proper demeanor, declaring me the ideal choice for crown princess. But I'm no fool. I know this old man chose me as his son's bride not merely for my looks, but because of the Song family's immense power. The military honors and prestige my father and brothers have accumulated over the years are both a blessing for the great Liang and our Song family, yet they also hang like a double-edged sword over both the emperor and our house. Thus, I was merely a tool the emperor used to court and balance the power of the Song family. After the emperor's decree of marriage, I began receiving the finest and most rigorous training under the title of future crown princess consort. From music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, to poetry, needlework, even the classics and imperial etiquette, I had to learn it all. And not just learn it, but master it thoroughly. This education spanned a full decade. Originally, in 3 months' time, when spring warmed the land next year, on the auspicious date chosen by the Imperial Astronomical Bureau, I was to be carried in a palanquin borne by 8 bearers, adorned in 10 miles of crimson finery, welcomed into the Crown Prince's residence with great fanfare and splendor to fulfill the marriage vow I had guarded for 10 years. But all of this came to an abrupt halt on the day the Crown Prince sought to annul our betrothal. That day coincided with the first snowfall of the year. Unlike the gentle, salt-like flurries of previous winters, this inaugural snow fell thick and fast. Amidst the swirling cold flakes, the crown prince knelt outside the imperial study, his posture rigid and resolute. He declared he wished to annul the betrothal. He sought not me, Song Yujin, but my younger sister, Song Jing'an. When the news reached me, I had just regained my composure from the joy of rebirth. Palace attendants stood at my door, announcing His Majesty summoned me to the palace. Miss, your cold has only just begun to improve. Rest is paramount. Perhaps we should decline the summons? By my bedside, my personal maid Qingman gazed at me with worry, her brows furrowed with a hint of resentment. I knew what troubled her. It seemed this life mirrored the last. During my half-month of severe cold, the world outside had undergone earth-shattering changes. After a moment's thought, I lowered my gaze and shook my head. It's fine. Help me change. Before I even reached the imperial study, I spotted Xu Yunheng kneeling in the deep snow from afar. His back was straight, his head slightly bowed, allowing the falling snow to pile and melt upon his shoulders. Stepping past the palace maid holding my umbrella, I walked straight to his side. This was the first time I'd seen Xu Yunheng from above. Perhaps from kneeling too long, the handsome youth's face had grown pale, almost translucent. Snow-soaked hair clung to his temples, matted against his cheeks. Whenever I'd seen him before, his head was always held high, his features radiating an air of noble pride. To witness him looking so disheveled was truly unprecedented. For the crown prince of a nation to disregard propriety to such an extent for a commoner's daughter was indeed a rare spectacle. Miss Song. He glanced back at me, his eyes flickering with apology, his voice hoarse. Miss Song, I know this matter is my fault. But you have been betrothed to me for years. You should know that I harbor not the slightest romantic affection for you. I lowered my gaze to meet his shifting eyes. Contrary to his expectations, I showed neither anger nor sorrow. My tone remained calm as I replied, Your Highness, you must understand that our marriage was decreed by His Majesty himself. Your actions today not only disgrace me, but also insult the Emperor. At my words, Xu Yunheng froze for a moment before regaining his composure. A flicker of hesitation crossed his eyes, yet he remained silent. To incur the Emperor's displeasure over a concubine's daughter, this is truly unbecoming of a crown prince. Seeing his silence, I blinked. So, your highness still insists on annulling our betrothal and demands to marry my younger sister instead? This time, his gaze was unwavering, his words ringing with conviction. Yes. I promised Jing and I would make her my sole wife, vowing to be with her for one lifetime, one world, one person. One lifetime, one world, one person? Hearing this, I felt no surprise, only a faint urge to laugh. The imperial family is the most heartless of all. That Chu Yinheng, as crown prince, could utter such words. Truly, he must be utterly bewitched. And my younger sister? Utterly naive. Relying on her status as a lone soul from another world, possessing skills others lack, she dares to urge the heir apparent to marry only her for life. It was so in my past life, and it is so in this one. How utterly ignorant of their place in the world. I lifted my head slightly, watching the snow falling ever more densely from the sky, and restrained my emotions a little. Your Highness, do you have no regrets? Absolutely none. His voice was firm and resolute. At this moment, he suddenly regained the arrogance befitting a crown prince. I only hope that this time, he truly will have no regrets. After a long silence, I gently brushed snowflakes from my shoulder, curved my lips slightly, and curtsied gracefully to him. Then Eugene can only comply with your highness's wish. Henceforth, I pray your highness may fulfill his heart's desire and find a worthy companion. Soon, news of Chu Yinheng and my annulled betrothal spread through the capital on the cold wind. After 10 years as the crown prince's betrothed, I became an abandoned bride-to-be overnight. Some pitied me, some sighed for me, but most mocked me. The Song family held considerable status in Great Liang, yet the higher one climbs, the colder it gets. Naturally, many were eager to witness the Song family's downfall. However, the annulment had little impact on me personally and even secured some benefits for the Song family. To appease my father, His Majesty summoned him to the palace that very night. He bestowed numerous gifts upon me and granted permission for my 2 elder brothers, stationed at the frontier, to return home for the new year. As for the crown prince's insistence on marrying Song Jing'an, the emperor made no mention of it whatsoever, let alone issuing an imperial decree to arrange the marriage. Though Song Jing'an was indeed a Song family daughter, and her beauty ranked among the finest in the capital, but ultimately, she is merely a concubine-born daughter. Her mother, once a lowly maid, possesses neither talent nor virtue, and her name carries no weight. If she were to marry into a minor official's household in the capital, she might barely qualify for the position of primary wife. Alas, she aspires to marry the crown prince, to become his crown princess. With her current status and standing, she wouldn't even be worthy of a secondary consort's position. Father rushed straight from the palace to my courtyard, intent on comforting me. Genie, your health has only just recovered. Don't trouble yourself with such trivial matters, and pay no heed to others' idle gossip. They only see the glory of being crown princess, but I've long known the imperial palace as a den of dragons and tigers. Now that you needn't marry him, it's actually for the best. I poured a cup of tea and handed it to him. Rest assured, father. A Song family daughter knows when to let go. It's not that Chu Yinheng rejected me, it's that I, Song Yujin, no longer see him as worthy. Truly? My father hesitated, words caught in his throat. But, Jeaner, all these years, I've known your feelings for the crown prince. I nodded, my expression calm. Truly. For 10 years of betrothal, I firmly believed he was the one I would spend my life with. So, day after day, year after year, I placed my heart entirely in his hands. But my past life experience had long since pulled me out of that lowly, self-sacrificing love. Good. Jeaner, hearing you think this way puts my mind at ease. Father drank the tea in one gulp, his face showing relief, but then his brow furrowed again. What father never anticipated was Jing'an seizing the opportunity to set her sights on the crown prince while you were gravely ill. Had I known sooner of her audacity, I should have betrothed her long ago. I lowered my gaze. Father, do not blame yourself. The world is unpredictable. Who could have foreseen that second sister, usually so composed and reserved, would suddenly muster such boldness? Besides, love takes 2. If His Highness truly held any affection for me, how could he have been so easily bewitched by my second sister? Ultimately, it was simply that fate had not destined this daughter for the crown prince. After offering a few more gentle admonitions, father finally rose and departed. The moment he left, I slipped on a warm coat and instructed Qingman to bring a bowl of warming soup. Together, we made our way to the ancestral hall in the rear courtyard. Miss, after what second sister did to you, how can you still bring her soup? Qingman glared at me, her frustration palpable as she carried the steaming bowl. I gave Qingman a reassuring look. If I don't confront her, how will I ever know where I truly fell short? Half a month prior, on the winter solstice, the palace hosted a grand winter hunt. Naturally, the Song family was among the invited guests. Yet no one could have anticipated that, just as the hunt was reaching its peak, several startled wild horses suddenly bolted from the woods. In the chaos, Song Jing'an, several noble daughters, and I all tumbled into the river, its surface barely frozen. The other young ladies and I were closer to the bank and were rescued in time. Song Jing'an, however, was swept away by the hidden current, vanishing without a trace. The winter underground river was swift and frigid. Swept away like that, her chances were slim. Just as the entire Song family was consumed by worry and anxiety, Song Jing'an returned, brought back by Chu Yunheng. The underground river had carried her downstream to the riverbank, where she happened upon Chu Yunheng, who was hunting nearby. Having been betrothed to Chu Yunheng for years, he instantly recognized Song Jing'an's identity and promptly escorted her back himself. Following this incident, the winter hunt concluded hastily. Out of concern for the Song family, His Majesty specially dispatched imperial physicians to treat and recuperate both me and Song Jing'an. The difference was that this fall into the water left me gravely ill, confined to my sickbed for over half a month. Yet Song Jing'an, who should have suffered far worse from the cold, seemed completely unaffected. After merely 2 days of recuperation, she regained her usual vigor. However, after this ordeal, Song Jing'an changed. She shed her former quiet reserve and became outwardly lively. During my illness, she committed one earth-shattering act after another. Dressed as a man, she frequented brothels, drank wine, and composed verses and melodies for the courtesans. She stormed into poetry gatherings where literati gathered to challenge them. Faced with challenges from literary masters, she composed poems every 3 steps and lyrics every 7, leaving the entire assembly speechless with astonishment. All marveled at her world-shaking talent. In no time, Song Jing'an's fame spread throughout the capital, making her the most talked-about woman in the city. Every day, a steady stream of visitors came to the Song residence seeking an audience with her, eager to discuss poetry and seek her guidance. Yet despite her unparalleled glory and adoration, Song Jing'an spent her days trailing behind His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. Together they discussed poetry, analyzed ancient lyrics, deliberated statecraft, and conversed about the common people. Until the Crown Prince's gaze toward her gradually shifted, until rumors about them began circulating through the streets. All this, lying long upon my sick bed, was not lost upon me. I knew the Crown Prince took her to the plum garden to brew plum wine, and accompanied her to the lantern festival to set river lanterns afloat. I also knew he spent a fortune to purchase an entire brothel for her, dismissing all the women within, simply because she wished to uphold justice and grant them freedom. Had these events befallen others, they would indeed have been enviable, worthy of being celebrated as a beautiful tale. But the protagonists of these events were Song Jing'an and the Crown Prince, one the current heir apparent, the other the younger half-sister of the future Crown Princess. Not to mention, neither concealed their admiration for the other. Thus, as the beautiful tale spread, its flavor inevitably soured. Long before the Crown Prince knelt to beg for the annulment of our engagement, father had already severed all contact between Song Jing'an and him. He punished her by confining her to the ancestral hall for reflection, forbidding her to step outside without his permission. When I arrived at the ancestral hall, Song Jing'an was sitting casually on a chair. 2 plates of half-eaten pastries sat on the tea table beside her. Her delicate, charming face radiating an indescribable brightness and exuberance. She looked less like someone here to reflect and more like someone who happened to drop by for a leisurely sit. "What brings you here, sister?" Seeing me, she seemed slightly surprised, yet she didn't even bother to rise, remaining lazily reclined in her chair. Before I could speak, she arched an eyebrow, her tone tinged with amusement. "Don't tell me you're here to lay down the law?" "Sister, it's not that I want to compete with you," she continued, "but from what I understand, though you and Brother Yunheng were betrothed long ago, you're too rigid, too dull. Brother Yunheng never truly cared for you." Forced marriages never bring happiness, they're doomed to fail. As she spoke, Song Jingin shook her head and sighed, her tone laced with pity and disdain. I met her slightly mocking gaze and replied calmly, "You're right, little sister. Forced marriages never bring happiness. Since you and His Highness the Crown Prince truly love each other, as your elder sister, I certainly shouldn't stand in your way." "What do you mean?" Hearing my words, Song Jingin was visibly shocked, finally rising from her chair. This morning, His Highness the Crown Prince knelt before the imperial study, petitioning His Majesty to dissolve our engagement. I have granted his request. Now, the Crown Prince and I are entirely unconnected. She abruptly stepped forward, leaping to stand before me, her voice brimming with astonishment and doubt. "You truly dissolved your engagement with Brother Yunheng?" "Of course it's true. If you don't believe me, sister, you can go ask around. By now, the entire capital should know about this." No sooner had I finished speaking than a hint of unmistakable joy flashed across Song Jingin's fair face. She exclaimed happily, "Then what about my marriage to Brother Yunheng? Did His Majesty set a date?" I paused, furrowing my brow. "Well, His Majesty hasn't mentioned it. Besides, selecting a noble concubine for His Royal Highness the Crown Prince doesn't require an imperial decree." At this, Song Jingin's face darkened instantly. "Noble concubine? Why a noble concubine? Didn't Brother Yunheng say he would marry me as his consort?" "I'm afraid I must disappoint you, sister. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is the heir apparent, a position of supreme honor. Even if he desires nothing more than to be with you for a lifetime, the rank of Crown Princess is simply beyond your station." I spoke slowly, my voice tinged with regret. Song Jingin frowned, glaring at me with clenched teeth. "Since I've come to this world, I'll rise to the pinnacle of glory. What's a crown princess? I'll show you whether I'm worthy of it." Half a month later, as the year drew to a close, an imperial decree of betrothal descended. Song Jingin became the crown princess to be as she'd wished. Following this came the news of her being enfeoffed as Princess Ningda. Perhaps stung by my words that night, after father lifted her house arrest, Song Jingin never returned to the general's mansion. She moved into a detached courtyard within the Crown Prince's residence and began pouring out counsel and advice for him. From military strategy and battlefield formations to irrigation systems and agricultural policies, she offered sound counsel on nearly every matter. This earned the Crown Prince considerable praise from His Majesty and the court officials alike. Leveraging the Crown Prince's influence, she once again became the most sought-after extraordinary woman in the capital. Even His Majesty could not resist summoning her. What transpired during that audience remains unknown. But when Song Jingin emerged from the imperial study, she had transformed into the Princess of Ningda. Not only did she receive His Majesty's bestowal, but she also attained a status and position befitting the Crown Princess. Throughout the capital, envy burned fiercely toward her. In status, she was the illegitimate daughter who had risen. In marriage, she held the Crown Prince's undivided devotion. In prospects, she enjoyed the Emperor's esteem and the officials' praise. Everything people yearned for yet could scarcely attain had come to pass for her. Armed with the Emperor's decree and her new identity, Song Jingin returned to the general's residence with an air of superiority. When I saw her again, she was dressed in opulent finery, her eyes gleaming with even greater pride. "Sister, after half a month apart, you seem to have grown thinner." If you ask me, the general's residence is merely an official's dwelling. Its feng shui simply can't compare to the nourishing atmosphere of the Crown Prince's palace. I studied her closely. It seemed the Crown Prince had indeed cared for Song Jingin well during her time away from the general's residence. In just half a month, her cheeks and waist had filled out noticeably. Gone was the frailty that once evoked pity, in its place was a fresh, girlish charm. I recalled the Crown Prince once saying the beauty in his heart should be like a willow swaying in the breeze. Little did I know his tastes had changed so much. Withdrawing my gaze, I offered a faint smile. "I've only just recovered from a serious illness. The physician advised that my body is still weak and requires gentle nourishment. As for you, my dear sister, now that your betrothal is settled, the palace will soon send artisans to tailor your wedding gown. You do well to curb your appetite, lest the dress prove ill-fitting when the time comes." Her expression stiffened momentarily before turning impatient. "Sister needn't trouble herself. Brother Yunheng will personally oversee our wedding garments, there will be no mishap. That is most fortunate. I nodded, my demeanor as composed and proper as ever. Perhaps finding my calmness too unsettling, Song Jingin's face suddenly darkened, her eyes brimming with disgust and contempt. I had thought that after all these years, you might have some affection for Brother Yunheng. But now it seems, Song Yujin, you truly are a product of this feudal era. Does it matter whether you love him or not? As long as your parents decree it and the matchmaker speaks, you'll hand yourself over to another? Utterly without conviction, foolish and backward. Boring and laughable. Feudal era? This wasn't the first time I'd heard Song Jingin speak such words. In my past life, she looked down on me with the same contempt as she did on everyone else in this so-called feudal era. For she was no longer the Song Jingin I once knew. I met her scornful gaze with my usual calm. I may not possess your sister's carefree spirit, but all I've ever sought in life is peace and smooth sailing. Hearing this, the disdain in her eyes deepened. I simply cannot fathom how someone as unambitious as you could become the protagonist of this world. But that changes now. This world belongs to me, and I am its true victor. With that, regardless of my reaction, she turned away with a smug look on her face. Miss. Only you could tolerate her. She stole your husband, and now, before she's even married, she dares to mock you with such arrogance. Utterly without decorum. Completely improper. As soon as she left, Qingman beside me flared with indignation. I glanced back at Qingman and offered a faint smile. Not everyone can act with such utter disregard for boundaries. But everything comes at a price, doesn't it? In this world, for every gain, there is an equal loss. Take Song Jingin now. To become crown princess, to prove she's different from us ignorant fools, to show the world that whatever she desires, she will obtain. So she strove to prove her worth to the crown prince and his majesty, even bartering her unique skill, the art of gunpowder alchemy, to secure her betrothal to the crown prince. Others may be unaware, but having battled her across 2 lifetimes, I know precisely why she could persuade his majesty. Now she has gained everything she desired. What I seek will surely come in due time. Outside, snow swirled through the window. Watching Song Jingin's receding figure, I closed the lattice. I only hope she does not disappoint me. The Imperial Astronomical Bureau determined the wedding date for Song Jingin and the Crown Prince, setting it for the first day of spring the following year. According to tradition, a bride-to-be should remain at home, quietly learning the duties of managing a household and serving her husband. But Song Jingin was no one to submit to such pedantic rituals. Empowered by her titles as Crown Princess Consort and Princess of Ningda, she grew even more outspoken. While serving His Majesty by teaching artisans the art of gunpowder making, she also opened a private academy in the capital. Advocating education for all, she welcomed students regardless of gender, age, or social standing, rich or poor, noble or commoner, all could learn to read and write in her school. This act only fueled her reputation as an extraordinary woman. On New Year's Eve, the palace hosted a banquet for officials of the 4th rank and above, along with their families. Father brought me and my 2 brothers, who had specially returned for the family reunion, into the palace. This time, besides Qingman, I deliberately brought a maid skilled in water rescue. After my last drowning incident, Father had specially sought her out to protect me. Her name was Qinglan. Shortly after arriving, Father and my 2 brothers were summoned by His Majesty. Left alone, I wandered the imperial gardens with Qingman and Qinglan. Miss, if you wish to admire the scenery, why not visit the plum-leaning garden? I hear the plum blossoms there are truly magnificent. Qingyan followed behind me, her gaze lingering on the scenery along the path. In the depths of winter, the imperial garden had lost its usual vibrant display of blooming flowers, lacking the vibrant energy of the plum-leaning garden on the other side. Thus, for this palace banquet, nearly all the noble ladies and young misses had gone to the plum-leaning garden to admire the plum blossoms, leaving the imperial garden remarkably quiet. Yet sparse doesn't mean empty. As we approached a pavilion, a startled cry suddenly echoed from behind the rockery. It was followed by the sound of splashing water. Someone had fallen into the water. I led my 2 maids around to the back of the rockery and saw a large hole had suddenly appeared in the lake, which had been frozen over. Beneath the ice hole, a woman could be faintly seen flailing her arms and struggling desperately. Hearing her cries for help growing fainter, I waved my hand and urgently called Qinglan to jump in and rescue her. Fortunately, though the winter lake was icy cold, Qinglan's robust physique and agile movements in the water allowed her to swiftly pull the woman to safety. After Qinglan vigorously patted and pressed her chest, the woman suddenly coughed up a large mouthful of cold water, fully reviving. I instructed Qingman to summon palace maids to escort the woman and Qinglan to change clothes and warm up, preventing them from catching a chill. Just as we were about to leave the imperial garden, we encountered Song Jing'an and the crown prince strolling toward us. Upon seeing me, the smile instantly vanished from Song Jing'an's face. It was the crown prince who first noticed the unusual situation. He glanced at me, then at the woman being carried by palace maids behind me, looking perplexed. "Miss Song, what happened?" I curtsied gracefully and replied calmly, "Nothing serious. We merely happened upon a young lady who slipped and fell into the water. She has been rescued, and I am now escorting her to the side hall to change her clothes." Upon hearing my explanation, the crown prince did not press further. He instinctively stepped aside, clearing a path for us to escort the woman away. Just as I passed by Song Jing'an, she lowered her voice and hissed, "Song Yujin, what exactly are you scheming?" I turned my head to glance at her. She was sharp enough to notice my actions differed slightly from usual, but her perception was already useless. I replied softly, "Seems your otherworldly spirit lacks the gift of foresight." My words drifted away, their echoes quickly fading. I didn't look back to see Song Jing'an's expression, instead leading the person behind me away at a brisk pace. 3 days later, news reached the palace. The northern Khanate had arrived bearing lavish tributes to the Great Liang Kingdom and expressed intent to form a marriage alliance. The news filled the entire court with delight. My father and brothers were so overjoyed they drank the night away. Though a vassal state of Great Liang, the northern Khanate lay in remote, harshly variable terrain, rendering its lands perpetually barren. Thus, since Great Liang's founding, the northern Khanate had harbored latent rebellious intentions. The border region between the Khanate and the Great Liang Empire had long been a hotbed of unrest. Compounding this, the Khanate's people were renowned for their fierce bravery and willingness to die in battle. Consequently, even with my father and brothers stationed there year-round to suppress the unrest, the Great Liang Empire had achieved little success. Now, with the method for refining gunpowder nearing completion, Great Liang finally possesses a means to thoroughly subdue the northern Khanate. Yet, since the northern Khanate has offered tribute to Great Liang of its own accord and expressed willingness to submit through a marriage alliance, there is no need for major military action. Winning the hearts of the people in this manner would be a great blessing for both the nation and its citizens. Amidst this court-wide celebration, however, there was one person who found little comfort. "Young lady, I hear several vases were smashed again this morning at Taiyuan Pavilion." As I sat in the courtyard entertaining friends, Qingman chatted with me while cheerfully pouring tea for my companions, clearly relishing the misfortune. Taiyuan Pavilion was Song Jing'an's quarters. Now that she was awaiting her marriage, it was naturally inappropriate for her to continue residing with the crown prince. Thus, she had moved back to the general's mansion several days prior. "What? Is she so unwilling to see me marry Chu Yinheng?" Hearing Qingman's words, the woman across from me curled her lips, a hint of disdain coloring her radiant face. The more she disliked it, the more determined I was to marry. I looked at her, smiling faintly as I shook my head. "Linger, matters of marriage must never be decided on impulse. The crown prince may not be the right match for you. You should certainly reconsider. Sister Yujin, your very gentleness is why Song Jing'an stole your match. I, Tuobo Linger, am after all the legitimate princess of Beihan. I know what it means to repay kindness. You saved my life. Naturally, I must help you vent your anger," Tuobo Linger declared, patting her chest with righteous fervor, her eyes brimming with innocent charm. With a sigh of resignation, I pinched a piece of pastry and stuffed it into her mouth. "I saved you, but not so you could sacrifice your own marriage to vent my anger. Stop this nonsense." Tuobo Linger was the woman I had rescued in the imperial garden that day, the legitimate princess of the northern Khanate. The northern Khanate had sought a marriage alliance with the Great Liang Empire precisely to find a husband for Tuobo Linger. Though Beihan was a vassal state of Daliang, offering its legitimate princess as a bargaining chip for a marriage alliance demonstrated Beihan's sincerity. Daliang naturally could not disregard such goodwill. Thus, after meticulous selection based on status, virtue, and scholarly merit, Crown Prince Chu Yunheng emerged as the ideal candidate. However, De Liang's laws forbade a foreign princess from becoming the crown prince's primary consort. Thus, the emperor intended to betroth Tuobo Linger to the crown prince as a secondary consort, to be married on the same day as Song Jing'an. Exchanging the position of secondary consort for the harmonious union of two nations seemed a mutually beneficial arrangement welcomed by all. Only Song Jing'an, upon learning of this arrangement, was so enraged he confined himself indoors for 3 days, smashing every ornament in his chambers. In his previous life, an identical situation had unfolded. But back then, the one who rescued Tuobo Linger was none other than Song Jing'an and the crown prince, who had gone to the imperial garden to share their affection. Upon learning she would compete for the crown prince with her own savior, Tuobo Linger voluntarily withdrew. She ultimately married a scholar official under the crown prince's command, thereby aligning the entire northern khanate as an ally to the crown prince. But this lifetime, I acted faster than her. She must have heeded my counsel, for regarding the marriage alliance, Tuobo Linger did not immediately accept the emperor's bestowed match. Yet she had no intention of letting Song Jing'an rest easy. Under the pretext of needing more time with the crown prince before deciding, she frequently invited him on outings, becoming a thorn in his side. Though the crown prince sensed Song Jing'an's discontent, he was bound by the peace between Great Liang and Beihan, as well as the emperor's special instructions. He reluctantly set Song Jing'an aside for the time being, accompanying Tuobo Linger on her leisurely outings. Song Jing'an shattered even more ornaments. Even the calligraphy, paintings, and jewelry the crown prince had specially sent to win her favor were flung out of her room. Ever since awakening from her drowning accident, she was no longer the quiet, unassuming Song Jing'an of before. These past days, she had basked in adulation, savored the limelight, and obtained everything she desired with effortless ease. Yet she had stumbled precisely over Tuobo Linger, a rare and bitter humiliation. When Tuobo Linger and I met for our garden stroll, her eyes sparkled with triumph. She cheerfully hooked her arm through mine and declared, "Now Song Jing'an has finally tasted the bitter fruit of having her matchmaking schemes ruined. Seeing her humiliated is truly satisfying." I smiled wryly, reaching up to smooth a stray lock from her temple. In my past life, due to Song Jing'an, Tuobo Linger and I had little interaction. Back then, I only knew she disliked me, always treating me with haughty arrogance whenever we met. Looking back now, though this little girl was bold and overbearing, she was simply straightforward. She adored those she liked with all her heart and refused to give even a friendly glance to those she disliked, a bluntness that was rather endearing. After I finished tidying her hair, Tuobo Linger suddenly puckered her lips in disgust and said, "But if you ask me, Sister Eugen, breaking off your engagement with the crown prince is actually a blessing in disguise. After spending these past few days with His Highness, I've come to realize he's nowhere near as perfect as rumored. The heir apparent, no less, yet Song Jing'an can so easily manipulate his emotions. He sighs and frets day after day, completely lacking the bearing befitting an heir. It's downright unlucky." Hearing this, I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Sighing and fretting day after day? Who would have thought Song Jing'an could make the crown prince so deeply infatuated with her? It's rather laughable, really. The Chu Yunheng of old was rational, decisive, and utterly clear-headed, the most qualified heir apparent imaginable. Now he's become so entangled in love that he easily loses his composure and restraint. Linger, the crown prince is the heir apparent. Great Liang is not like your homeland in the northern khanate. Such words must not be spoken lightly in the future, understand? Pulling my thoughts back, I was about to continue strolling through the garden with Tuobo Linger when I looked up and saw Chu Yunheng's retreating figure, hastily departing. After several days together, Tuobo Linger ultimately refused the marriage alliance with the crown prince, instead seeking a more suitable suitor. Song Jing'an felt a weight lifted, finally able to await her wedding to the crown prince with peace of mind. The first day of spring should herald the revival of all things, yet this year's spring equinox brought unusually bitter cold, even a heavy snowfall. Nevertheless, Song Jing'an ascended the wedding sedan chair as planned. Treading through the snow, she rode amidst a 10-mile procession of crimson bridal finery into the crown prince's residence, becoming the rightful crown princess. Gazing at the general's residence adorned with crimson silk ribbons and the snow piled high along the streets, I pulled my coat tighter around me and couldn't help but sigh softly. This winter truly felt interminably long. After Song Jingin's wedding, the general's residence enjoyed a rare period of tranquility. Yet barely a month passed before winter gave way to spring. As the snow melted and the people prepared for spring plowing, the Munin region, Dalian's most fertile grain-producing area, was struck by relentless rain that fell for 2 months straight, as if the heavens had been pierced. The relentless downpour not only flooded millions of acres of fertile fields but also strained the river embankments to breaking point, ultimately causing them to breach. Overnight, the people were plunged into unbearable suffering, their grievances mounting. To expedite flood control efforts and soothe public discontent, His Majesty, after much deliberation, dispatched the Crown Prince to Munin to personally oversee the relief operations. Yet barely half a day after his arrival in Munin, the Crown Prince suddenly vanished without a trace. 2 days later, an urgent memorial was delivered to the palace. Amidst the flood chaos, a band of fierce bandits had emerged within Munin's borders, committing acts of robbery and amassing a long list of crimes. While bandit uprisings were not unheard of, this particular incident took a grim turn. The Crown Prince fell victim to multiple ambushes along his journey to Munin and was abducted. Not content with merely kidnapping the heir apparent, these criminals, likely realizing their actions had committed an unforgivable crime leaving them no way out, began rallying displaced refugees. They formed their own army, plotting rebellion and insurrection. Upon receiving the news, His Majesty flew into a rage. He summoned my father and elder brother to the palace that very night, dispatching them southward to suppress the rebellion and retrieve the Crown Prince. Quelling a rebel uprising proved vastly different from ordinary bandit suppression. Though the rebels were poorly armed, their intimate knowledge of Munin's terrain, coupled with the cover of persistent rain, initially gave my battle-hardened father and brother a tough time. Back in the capital, Song Jingin remained deeply concerned about the situation in Munin. Upon learning of the dire straits the frontline forces were in, he petitioned His Majesty personally to escort a newly manufactured batch of gunpowder to the front lines as reinforcements. Though His Majesty felt this was unwise, he agreed, considering that the gunpowder indeed needed to be tested in actual combat. Bolstered by this supply of gunpowder, and with my father and brothers studying the terrain and tactics day and night, within 5 days the rebel forces were driven back in successive defeats until they were finally forced to surrender. The Crown Prince, held as the rebels' bargaining chip for survival, was returned unharmed by their leader. This battle was a resounding victory. When the news reached the capital, the eyes of the entire city turned to the Song family. First, my father and brothers had added another military achievement to their names. Second, the gunpowder developed by Song Jingin had not only repelled the rebels but also stunned the people of Great Liang. Before, they only knew Song Jingin as a woman of extraordinary learning and profound knowledge, a rare genius unseen in centuries. But now, through her gunpowder, Song Jingin had elevated the entire nation of Daliang to an unshakable level of power. For this, Tuobo Linger felt profound relief that the northern Khanate had reconciled with Daliang. Otherwise, this gunpowder might have blown up far more than just the rebels. Her greatest worry, however, was that after this battle, Song Jingin would likely become even more arrogant. True to her expectations, when we encountered Song Jingin at the tea house, her face radiated unbridled arrogance. Tuobo Linger nearly rolled her eyes skyward, but Qing Man stepped in to shield her. Song Jingin's eyes sparkled with unchecked smugness. She lifted her chin toward us, her voice tinged with contempt. "Sister," she said, "long time no see. Hope all is well. Your Highness overthinks matters. With Great Liang enjoying peace and prosperity, I am naturally well." I lifted my gaze to meet hers, my eyes likely brimming with a smile that was neither humble nor arrogant, completely ignoring her disdain. Failing to see in me the reverence others showed her, Song Jingin visibly bristled. She stared at me for a long moment before continuing, "Song Yujin, I've told you before, I am the true victor in this world. I wonder how it feels to watch your half-sister marry the Crown Prince, to see my name reverberate across the land?" I curved my lips into a light smile. "Naturally, I'm delighted for you, Crown Princess. After the Battle of Munin, as your elder sister, I hadn't yet had the chance to congratulate you. Today, by coincidence, I'll offer my congratulations here first." All her probing had been in vain. A flicker of surprise crossed her eyes, and the irritation on her face deepened. After a moment, she composed herself, gave me a cold snort, and stormed off, flinging her sleeves behind her. As she brushed past me, I could still hear her whisper low in my ear, Song Yujin, you are so utterly ignorant. There is absolutely no pleasure in competing with you. That Song Jingin, she thinks she's the queen of the world. Utterly lacking in manners. She deserves a good smack. As soon as Song Jingin was gone, Tuoba Linger gritted her teeth and pumped her fist at her retreating back. I glanced in the direction Song Jingin had disappeared, then pulled Tuoba Linger into the tea house. It was just past noon, and the tea house was already packed to the rafters. On the small stage within, the storyteller slammed his gavel, recounting the tale of the Munan Rebellion. The most thrilling part of this story, naturally, was the scene where Crown Princess Song Jingin developed gunpowder, fearlessly defied the rebels, and personally journeyed south to rescue her husband. Every tea drinker in the house waved their hands in applause upon hearing it. Everyone marveled at how Song Jingin proved women were no less than men. Not only was she exceptionally learned and courageous, but she even invented such a marvelous substance as gunpowder. She was truly a goddess sent by heaven to the great Liang. To have such a goddess was indeed a blessing for the great Liang. Listening to the continuous cheers, Tuoba Linger shot me a displeased look. Sister Yujin, did you bring me to the tea house just to hear this? I poured myself a cup of tea at a leisurely pace before speaking slowly. Linger, what do you think of Song Jingin? Hearing this, Linger's almond-shaped eyes widened slightly as she snorted lightly. In my opinion, she, Song Jingin, is utterly arrogant and conceited. Even if she truly possesses some talent, as these people claim, no matter how extraordinary her abilities may be, she remains but a mortal, one among the countless subjects of great Liang. Does she truly believe herself a goddess? I nodded. Though Tuoba Linger was notoriously willful, she was still a princess of a nation. Her thoughts and words naturally held reason and insight. Yet, the principle that extremes breed their opposites, I understood it, Tuoba Linger understood it, but Song Jingin might not. Song Jingin's fame spread far and wide, and for a time, the whole world was abuzz with tales of her extraordinary deeds. Her prominence in the capital was unmatched. Those seeking favor or an audience at the Crown Prince's residence practically wore out the threshold of his mansion. Yet, just as Song Jingin's influence reached its zenith, rumors began to take an unexpected turn. Having previously defied the emperor to marry her, coupled with the recent abduction of Crown Prince Munan, the people's perception of the Crown Prince had shifted. Rumors even surfaced, originating from unknown sources, suggesting the Crown Prince lacked virtue and competence, unfit for the role of heir apparent. His continued position as Crown Prince, it was claimed, was solely due to the divine presence of his consort, Song Jingin. These words thrust the Crown Prince instantly into the eye of the storm. Throughout the streets and alleys, discontent toward the Crown Prince grew among the people. Breaking the betrothal vows was seen as his betrayal of trust, abandoning the legitimate heir to marry a commoner was his disregard for propriety, his abduction during the southern expedition was his lack of foresight, his captivity in the bandits' camp was his poor strategy. In short, every blame fell squarely upon the Crown Prince. In stark contrast, behind each of these scandals loomed the increasingly prominent figure of Song Jingin. That a man should be outshone by his own wife in every endeavor, even relying on her achievements to maintain his position, such talk would bring shame upon any ordinary family. This was especially true for Chu Yunheng, who wore the imperial yellow robe and embodied the pride of the Crown Prince, representing the very face of the imperial family. As rumors spread, court officials began submitting petitions urging His Majesty to reconsider the heir apparent, insisting that a prince lacking popular support must not ascend the throne. Faced with pages filled with condemnation of the Crown Prince, the emperor flew into a rage, overturning his desk and scattering the memorials across the floor. That very night, an imperial edict reached the Crown Prince's residence. The Crown Prince was confined to his quarters for 1 month and ordered to copy the discourse on governing the state 100 times. The reason, he had indulged in women and neglected his studies, proving unfit for the great responsibility. As for Song Jingin, though the emperor did not confine her, he had grown displeased with her. He quietly revoked her privilege of freely entering the palace as a warning. After this incident, even with the Crown Prince's deep affection for Song Jingin, a rift began to form between them. During his confinement, the Crown Prince repeatedly refused her visits, citing the need for quiet reflection. Desperate to mend things, Song Jingin had no choice but to temporarily temper her sharp edges, focusing instead on pleasing both the emperor and the Crown Prince. When floods ravaged the south, she assisted the Crown Prince in compiling flood control manuals. When northern tribes provoked conflict, she advised him on military strategy and tactics. By late summer the following year, a devastating drought struck the north, leaving fields barren and corpses littering the land. As refugees flooded the capital, she set up soup kitchens along the roads in the crown prince's name. Her efforts were not in vain. After exhausting every resource and attributing all honors to the crown prince, his reputation not only gradually recovered but began to surpass its former glory. He was even personally selected by His Majesty to assist in reviewing memorials. The crown prince no longer avoided her, and she regained her former favor, returning to her position as the proud crown princess. Just as Song Jing'an breathed a sigh of relief, the crown prince suddenly fell ill. This illness proved exceptionally peculiar. The entire Imperial Medical Academy was baffled, none of the physicians able to diagnose the cause. It was only when the legendary physician Hua Yunqing, long retired from the world, was summoned that progress was made. Rumor had it that Master Hua and the former empress had been childhood sweethearts. Long before she married His Majesty, he had sworn never to treat anyone of the imperial family again. Yet, for the sake of the crown prince, His Majesty had no choice but to personally plead with Master Hua to emerge from seclusion and enter the palace to diagnose him. But the divine physician demanded the emperor sign a written agreement before all. If he were to treat the emperor, the crown prince must marry his adopted daughter as a consort. Should the crown prince ascend the throne, he must crown her empress, the foremost lady of the harem. Only then would he break his vow and emerge to save the crown prince. Upon hearing this news, the entire capital turned its attention once more to Song Jing'an. She had been married to the crown prince for barely over a year, her position as crown princess only recently secured. Now, suddenly, this adopted daughter of the divine physician appeared to challenge her. Naturally, Song Jing'an was unwilling. Yet, gazing upon the crown prince lying on his bed, day after day in a deep slumber, growing ever more emaciated, she found herself unable to utter a single word of protest. In the end, the sudden surge of anger overwhelmed her, and she fell ill for several days. This illness was diagnosed by the imperial physicians as a physical ailment, one that rendered her incapable of bearing children for the rest of her life. What infertility meant in an imperial household, Song Jing'an understood all too well. Overnight, Song Jing'an faced multiple blows. After repeated persuasion from the emperor, who promised not to revoke her consort status but only to place Hua Xinyi's daughter on equal footing with her to shoulder the responsibility of carrying on the imperial line, she finally nodded in agreement, tears streaming down her face. A year later, the crown prince's wedding took place once more. Red silk adorned every household in the capital, creating a bustling spectacle. The young man on the white horse still wore a radiant smile, while the beautiful bride in the wedding sedan chair held herself with dignified grace. Tuobo Linger and I sat in a tea house by the street, watching the crown prince's attendants distribute festive treats along the road, each face radiant with joy. Tuobo Linger couldn't help but sigh wistfully. How could someone as proud as Song Jing'an bear to witness this scene? Remember, the crown prince once vowed to her, one man, one woman, for a lifetime. I sipped my tea lightly. This world is full of unpredictable twists and turns. Even those closest to you can suddenly change beyond recognition. How much more so for the unforgiving realm of imperial families? Since she insisted on marrying into the royal house, she should have known that no matter how solemn the vows once made, before an emperor, they would vanish like mist. Tuobo Linger nodded, seeming to grasp yet not fully comprehend, then murmured, "Now I understand why His Majesty chose Sister Yujin as crown princess." I lowered my gaze slightly. In this life, perhaps because I seized every advantage, events unfolded far more swiftly than in my previous existence. Song Jing'an, too, seemed more impatient than before. Such haste has thrown her off balance, making her more confused than in the past life. The position of crown princess is indeed not for everyone to bear, but I am also relieved that it is not me who occupies that seat. Hearing my words, Tuobo Linger blinked in confusion and asked, "Why?" I sighed softly, gazing at the wedding procession filling the long street, and murmured, "The most unpredictable thing in this world is the human heart, and how much more so the heart of an emperor." With the new bride entering the palace, the crown prince spent far less time with Song Jing'an. At first, Song Jing'an was unwilling to accept this. She wept daily, even resorting to every trick and scheme imaginable, all to lure the crown prince away from Hua Yingxi's chambers. The crown prince, feeling guilty toward her, would immediately abandon Huangji to accompany her whenever he sensed her pouting. He would even bring her favorite foods and jewelry, thoughtfully sharing meals with her, embracing her as they slept, and doing everything to win her favor. Yet such days did not last long. Less than half a year after Huangji entered the crown prince's residence, the imperial physician diagnosed her with pregnancy. As the emperor's eldest legitimate son, the crown prince bore the responsibility of producing an heir. This child, regardless of gender, would become the imperial family's first legitimate grandchild. The emperor rejoiced upon hearing the news. Countless gifts poured into the crown prince's residence like a torrent. The crown prince spent increasingly more time with Huangji, no longer paying attention to Song Jing'an's petty tantrums. Day after day, Song Jing'an visibly wasted away, her frame growing increasingly thin and frail. When the imperial physician examined her, he merely attributed her condition to emotional distress, prescribing rest and recuperation. Upon learning this, the crown prince resumed frequent visits. Most of the precious tonics bestowed by the palace now found their way into Song Jing'an's quarters. Despite these efforts, her condition showed no improvement, growing worse by the day. The imperial physicians bluntly declared her illness had become terminal, and her days were numbered. It was only when Huangji reached her 7th month of pregnancy that I received an invitation sent by Song Jing'an's attendants. She wished to see me. Just as in my past life, in the end, the person Song Jing'an longed to see was still me. After receiving the invitation, I had Qingman prepare a batch of osmanthus cakes, her favorite treat from years past. It would be my final gift to her. The moment I stepped into the crown prince's residence, I spotted a graceful figure in lake blue robes from afar. Huangji stood beneath the osmanthus tree in the courtyard, her pregnant belly visible, her expression serene and composed. Catching sight of me out of the corner of her eye, she slowly turned, offering me a radiant smile, a beauty so dazzling it took one's breath away. Her every movement was dignified and graceful, bearing no resemblance to a mountain-dwelling herb-gatherer. Instead, she resembled a noble lady raised in seclusion since childhood. Observing her serene and gentle demeanor, I understood, the imperial family had indeed found someone far more exceptional than I had imagined. Still, finding someone other than myself who could truly bear the title of crown princess, marry the crown prince without hindrance, and avoid Song Jing'an's opposition, that must have taken His Majesty considerable effort. Upon entering Song Jing'an's chamber, I found her slumped weakly against the bed, pale and gaunt. The entire room was thick with the pungent, bitter scent of medicine. When she saw me, the dull, lifeless glint in her eyes flickered briefly before giving way to a fit of violent coughing, as if she might cough her very soul away. "What brings you here, sister?" I selected a chair not far from her and sat down. After coughing for a moment, she finally calmed down, her gaze fixed on me with intense scrutiny. "Song Yujin, you once said I was a ghost from another world, incapable of foreseeing the future. Did you know something all along?" I looked at her, my lips curving into a faint smile. "What difference does it make if I knew? What difference does it make if I didn't? In your current state, what could you possibly do?" Hearing my words, Song Jing'an's pupils suddenly contracted, a flash of panic darting across her eyes. "Impossible! This can't be!" When I traveled through time, in the original host's memories, you never possessed the ability to foresee the future. You're not Song Yujin. I knew why I couldn't defeat you, clearly I'm the chosen one. Everything should have unfolded exactly as I predicted. It's you! You've been manipulating everything, haven't you? She pointed a finger at me, her face twisting into a frenzied, savage expression, as if struck by a devastating blow. Were she not already in the final stages of her illness, I wouldn't doubt she'd lunge at me to tear me apart. I stood up, towering over her with a cold, icy gaze. From the very beginning, I have always been Song Yujin. And what you couldn't defeat wasn't me, it was this so-called feudal society you speak of. You despise this so-called feudal society, yet you flaunt your rare skills in the marketplace, recklessly putting yourself forward. But have you ever considered that every person and every event here exists precisely because of those feudal laws you scorn? They are what allow everything to develop and endure. You delude yourself into thinking you can ignore the world's laws and rules, that you can make everything unfold and change as you wish. But you forget, what you seek to manipulate are not mindless puppets on strings, but flesh and blood individuals. Thus, From the very beginning, your fate was sealed." No sooner had I finished speaking than she clutched her head, shaking it violently, her eyes blazing with refusal. "You're lying. You're lying. I was chosen to travel here, I am the protagonist of this world. Protagonists never lose. Just wait, once I recover, I'll have the Crown Prince execute you as a demoness." At this point, I suddenly felt a pang of pity for her. Having lived this long, she still didn't understand why she had fallen into such a predicament. Sighing softly, I murmured, "Song Jing'an, the imperial family is the most ruthless. Perhaps the Crown Prince once held genuine feelings for you, but you were too rebellious. Your words and deeds were overly conspicuous, yet you lacked the necessary cunning. Naturally, they could not keep you. From start to finish, if you ask whether I ever schemed against Song Jing'an, the answer is yes. But I was merely one who helped push things along. The ones who truly pushed her into this deadly trap were the Crown Prince, His Majesty, imperial power itself, her own delusion that the Crown Prince's love was unbreakable, and ultimately, herself. Had she not been so eager to stand out, to the point of overshadowing her sovereign, she might have lived several more years. She would have been neglected only after the Crown Prince truly grew weary of her, fading away in melancholy. Instead, she now faced her most beloved feeding her a deadly poison, drop by drop, until there was no hope left. My words seemed to awaken Song Jing'an. She suddenly fell silent, staring at me blankly, her eyes filled with desolation. After a moment, her lips trembled as she stammered, "You mean Brother Yunheng? No, it can't be. He loves me. He loves me. How could it not be?" After Song Jing'an fell into the water, imperial physicians had examined her. At that time, she was still healthy and able to bear children. Yet in just one short year, she suddenly became barren. The emperor seized upon this as leverage to arrange the marriage between the Crown Prince and Huangji. Now Huangji, pregnant, held an even more secure position. Yet Song Jing'an lay bedridden, her illness terminal, beyond even the imperial physician's help. Wasn't all this a bit too convenient? Moreover, since falling ill, all her food had come from the palace. Her descent into this state had, in truth, been foreshadowed long ago. Seeing her despair deepen, I needed say no more. I placed the specially brought osmanthus cakes on the tea table beside her and left the room. 3 days later, I heard that Song Jing'an had died, on the Crown Prince's bed. When the imperial physicians arrived, they found only a blood-soaked mattress. Both the Crown Prince and Song Jing'an lay collapsed upon the bed. In her death grip, Song Jing'an clutched a dagger. In her final moments, she had used that blade to sever the Crown Prince's means of producing heirs, and with it, his very possibility of ascending the throne. Upon hearing the news, Crown Princess Huangji fainted, triggering premature labor. She gave birth to a baby girl. I was profoundly shocked. Though I had long anticipated that, given her current disposition, she would act upon learning the truth, I never imagined she could be so ruthlessly vicious. Her actions, however, nearly implicated the entire Song family. Although Chu Yunheng was now fundamentally incapacitated and could no longer ascend the throne, he remained an imperial prince. Song Jing'an, meanwhile, was merely a concubine's daughter of the Song family. The crime of harming a prince could not be pursued against a dead man, so His Majesty directed his wrath toward the Song family. Fortunately, the Song family had generations of loyal service and meritorious deeds to their name. It would have been unwise to sever ties with them over a disgraced crown prince. Moreover, the imperial family was also at fault regarding Song Jing'an's death. Ultimately, the turmoil was quelled when the Song family surrendered half of their military authority. Father breathed a sigh of relief at this outcome. The Song family's long-held high status had always been a thorn in the emperor's side. Though their military power was now curtailed, it resolved the emperor's lingering concern and secured the Song family a more enduring peace. The capital suddenly grew quiet. Chu Yunheng was granted the title of Prince of Yun, with his fiefdom designated in the Munan region. He would soon depart the capital. His Majesty also designated a new heir apparent and was busy selecting a consort for the crown prince. Everything seemed to have returned to its proper course. On the day Chu Yunheng departed the capital, he unexpectedly visited the Song residence and met with me. Seeing him again, I felt he had changed considerably. The once elegant young gentleman now appeared sickly and despondent. Without his former arrogance, he seemed somewhat gloomy and oppressed. He gazed at me for a long time before asking if everything would have been different had he chosen me back then. I shook my head. Whether in this life or the last, the person he chose was never me. In the previous life, though he hadn't sunk to such misery, he was still dragged down by Song Jing'an's ignorance, incurred the emperor's wrath, and ultimately lost in the struggle for the throne. Thus, whether in the past or present, his fate had been sealed from the very beginning. Seeing my unwavering resolve, Chu Yunheng fell silent for a moment. Only when his eyes turned slightly red did he murmur, "It was wrong. It was wrong from the start." With that, he staggered away. Half a month later, I packed my belongings and boarded the carriage leaving the city, finally departing this place that had imprisoned me for 2 lifetimes. Sister Yujin, are you truly not regretting this? That was the crown prince's consort, the future empress. Tuobo Linger lamented from within the carriage. I raised an eyebrow. Then why are you leaving? Wouldn't it be better to become the crown prince's secondary consort, than a noble consort, and rule the harem alongside me? Paw. 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 As soon as I finished speaking, Tuobo Linger spat out in disgust. With my temperament, if I entered the palace, I'd likely die even faster than that Song Jing'an. I'd rather crawl back to Beihan and be my precious princess. As for the marriage alliance, let my father find a more suitable candidate. For the new heir's consort selection, I remained the prime candidate. His Majesty also intended to keep me as the seemingly exalted crown prince's consort. Besides me, the still unmarried Tuobo Linger became a contender for secondary consort. But this time, both Tuobo Linger and I have politely declined. These past days, I've seen through the imperial court's ways. And as I said before, all I've ever wanted in life is peace and smooth sailing. I lifted the curtain as the carriage moved forward, watching the once grand capital shrink in my sight. Since heaven has granted me another chance, this lifetime must hold moments lived for myself, not like my previous existence, forever trapped within the capital, consumed by hesitation and obsession. The end.